Wondering how your mindset affects your life? How to bring more energy into your business and life? Millions of people around the world ask these same questions daily. You are in the right place. Learn practices that will help give your life the meaning and success you've been searching for. Welcome to the Charge Podcast, teaching you how to create habits around real goals every day. Practical life advice from those who made it. Here's your host, Gary Wilbers.
This sponsorship break brought to you by the Leadership Navigator Academy. Want to know how to protect good employees from the Great Resignation of 2021? According to a 2021 Gallup poll on retaining top talent, managers account for 70% of the variance in team engagement. They are the heart of the organization. Now, developing your managers is the key to creating an effective employee experience. At the Leadership Navigator Academy, we've created a learning and development program that invests in your leaders and holds them and your employees accountable. Enroll your leader today in the in-person 2022 Leadership Navigator Academy. Save $500 if you enroll them by December 15th. Check out the link at chargepodcast.com and click on the link for Leadership Navigator Academy. Welcome, Chargers. We're glad to have you back again this week for another great guest. You know, our goal's been this quarter is really finding guests that will make you think, but really more than anything, think about what you want to put in practice for 2022. And I think we found that guest again for you that was really make you think, but also what do you want to put in each and every day? So today we've got with us Brian Roland. He's a social entrepreneur and founder of Abenity and a 6 times Inc. 5000 company that's powering corporate perks for top brands like US Bank and Mastercard. While Abenity provides millions of subscribers with private discounts, the company's social mission is fighting extreme poverty with every program they deliver. Abenity recently exceeded $1 million of total giving and hired a CEO to accelerate their growth with their fully remote team. Brian lives in Scottsdale, Arizona with his family and enjoys roasting coffee, flying drones, and helping impact-driven entrepreneurs establish a social mission of their own. Brian, it is great to have you on the Charge Podcast. Welcome.
Hey, Gary. Thanks for having me on here today.
Well, I'm glad to have you today. So much information on some great things that you're doing. But I always tell my guests, I think the best place we can start is telling a little bit about our story, because we know where you're at today from your bio. But the thing is, it's normally a journey to get there. And I think sometimes we forget about that journey. And for people that's listening to us, I think that story tells it. So will you share a little bit of background, how you moved from becoming an entrepreneur to where you're at today?
Absolutely. I started in Kansas and grew up through my first few years of college there. Really deeply invested in music. I played the trumpet. I was in every jazz band I could find. I was doing the orchestra thing and really, curious about commercial music. And that became a really interesting creative outlet for my entrepreneurial ambitions. And at the time, I didn't know I was being entrepreneurial, but the process of learning an instrument, becoming competitive within that, with other players, and kind of positioning and route and going for first chair or new bands or whatever solos, competitions, that really helped me on the entrepreneurial journey. Just kind of be okay with taking a leap of faith a lot of times, working for something, rubbing shoulders with other people to try to do a little better and become better and do it really at the highest level. And so that really built a work ethic for me that and required an activator personality, a self-starting personality, and acquiring goal where I'm looking to acquire position and influence, and that was a beautiful thing, and it led me to starting to teach trumpet lessons and help other people, and start a little teaching business, which led me to kind of from there. I recorded a CD called Destination Nashville, which helped me raise money to go to college in Nashville to kind of take another step towards the music industry, which led me to being in the music industry and experiencing that from an internship point of view. And really realizing that the entrepreneurial, that the music industry is not an entrepreneurial environment. And that really started, that became my first experience with a more corporate environment, with an environment that had a social agenda that was different than a professional agenda, which was really at odds with my strategic thinking. It's hard to have a strategy that's blocked by social agendas or red tape or politics or those sorts of things. And so that really led me to just kind of abandon the idea of the music industry and say, I don't think I can survive long-term in this space. And so I was graduating from college at that point, and I took a job selling cell phones. And I was like, well, is there anything more entrepreneurial than outside sales? And that's the job that I found. And so I showed up to my first day of work, graduating from college, and with an outside sales job. And my boss pretty much said, here's your $18,000 a year salary. I don't want you to come back to the office until you find 30 phones. And I don't really care how you find 30 phones, but it's easiest to knock on doors and talk to businesses because they might have 30 phones just in one space. Good luck. And I was one of, 10 or 15 other guys all doing the same thing. And so that was my first really big challenge as an entrepreneur.
That's interesting because I used to be in the wireless business for 22 years. So I knew we had some things in common.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So my, that first find 30 phones, I was like, okay, how do I find 30 phones? He said to go talk to businesses. I'm a musician. I'm 23. I don't know how to, he said, find the CFO. I don't know what a CFO is. I think he said, find a COO. And I definitely never heard of a coup before. So I was like, I'm going to go back to Belmont University. I'm going to go back to my school and talk to Anthony Donovan, who is the head of Residence Life, and say, Anthony, can I talk to you? Can I talk in one of your parent orientation meetings about getting their kids a cell phone? Because there's a bunch of parents coming in with kids from out of state. And he's like, that'd be great. So I did a few of those. I handed out, fill out your name and number. And I remember from my apartment complex being in the swimming pool, calling back parents and selling cell phones over the phone. And I made it to my 30 number that month. And I was like, this is amazing. And I did it from the swimming pool. And I was like, this is the life. And we got to put a check mark on this board with everybody's name, a leaderboard in the sales office. And it was awesome. And then October 31st rolled around, and I was so proud, and I had so many X's up there. And then I come in the office September 1st, and they just take an eraser and they just wipe the thing clean. And they're like, all right, go do it again. Don't come back until you got 30 phones. I was like, wait, what? All the parents went home. So I had to figure out something else to do.
So that is an interesting story. And I see he has the trumpet on the wall because we're, of course, seeing each other via Zoom. You're only hearing the audio side. So folks, stay tuned because, I like to challenge musicians because I have no musical talent whatsoever to say, oh, we might get him to play it a little bit at the end. So we'll see there. I don't know if that's, I always challenge that side. So just give that some thought, Brian. I won't put you on the spot, but I'll make you think about it throughout the interview. Well, it's kind of interesting because we all as entrepreneurs get our start in a unique way. And you kind of shared it with the cell phones and getting out there and understanding sales in that part of it. But it's kind of amazing to go from that. And, you're really going to have to share with me because I don't know myself. I know what the Inc. 5000 list is, but you've been on that 6 times. So
Yep.
share with us kind of that and really what you're doing with your business now, because I think our audience will be really interested because we know and understand we need to have more remote workers. But some people are really struggling with this. And I think it's more, to be honest, I consider I've been in business 30 years, so maybe I'm an older guy, is sometimes for them to see there is different ways to do business. So share a little bit about your company and the Inc. 5000 list.
Yeah. So I'd like to just pick up kind of where I left off because it's a natural progression. And I think that's what's most encouraging for people who are trying to start something or trying to move from where they are into an entrepreneurial venture. And because I say, look, the biggest secret to being an entrepreneur is just looking for a gap and working to fill it. That's all an entrepreneur does is they look for a blocker and they find a way around it. And the more niche you can find, the easier it will be long-term to hold and maintain your position. The more niche it is, the slower the ramp up period, because, by being so niche, you're going to have less customers out the gate. But that's kind of good because you don't have a lot of competition. And so it's really about, can you foster and develop that? And we're in one of those really interesting niches. So September rolls around in my first job and they just wiped the board clean. And I was like, I can't talk to business owners. I don't know, I don't understand these acronyms. I like talking to the parents. The parents all went home and they said, well, employees of big companies get a discount off their wireless services because of a corporate contract that exists. So the Pepsi employees down the road that work in at the plant, Pepsi has a bajillion phones with Sprint for their corporate use. And as a benefit, the 200,000 employees that work for Pepsi get a personal discount as an employee perk. And so go talk to the employees about their personal phones if you like talking to people about personal phones. It's called individual liable sales. And so I was like, you'll remember the ILCL acronyms if you're a wireless guy. So I started focusing on IL. And so I sat in the break room at Pepsi and I talked to people about phones. And then I realized it's like, a lot of these folks don't have the best credit and my time's not the best spent here. Plus I'm driving around. I'm driving to get papers signed. I'm driving back to pick up the phone. I'm driving to deliver the phone. Just wasn't very efficient. So I learned about the world of human resources and HR. And I realized, I was like, instead of going and sitting in a break room at Pepsi and talking to employees, why don't I design my own little flyer on the computer and email the person in corporate HR the flyer and say, hey, can you make this flyer available to all your employees? And so I started staying in the office and picking up the phone and calling HR people and said, hey, if I email you a flyer, will you distribute it? And they were like, it's based on their contracts. People weren't reaching out to them. So they're like, sure. So I just kept doing that. My phone started ringing and I started selling the phones over the phone. I remember the day where I had a stack of agreements I was working through and something like 30 voicemails because an email went out to a big list of employees and they're all calling me. And my boss's wife had to go through my voicemails and write down everything. And that was a turning point where I said, if we had a website that we could direct all these people to so they could see the phones online, I could brand it for the company. I could brand it for Sprint. I could list the specific discounts that apply. Then we could let the website take all the orders and we wouldn't be bogged down right now. And so my boss, who we were working at a third-party dealer of Sprint, thought that was a good idea. I said, well, my brother builds websites. He's getting his master's degree out in California. Maybe we can hire him. I can work with him really well. And that's what we did. And so Mark and I, my brother and I, started building these procurement portals for cell phones, offering the employee discount for Sprint. And it became it started to become, it was very disruptive because this is 2004, 2005. And Sprint Corporate was not used to anybody else's website showing up anywhere. They were still trying to figure out how to design their own website. And they had specific approved ones that were it was lots of corporate politics going on. And so my website was just showing up everywhere because I was just calling everyone I could find. And if they said yes, they got my website. And if you got my website, they got the Sprint stuff. And then the Sprint account manager, who was supposed to be getting in that area, would call foul and throw a red flag. And then I'd be in my boss's office sitting in the chair saying, Brian, what'd you do this time? I was like, yeah, I got into the Walt Disney Company. It was like, is that a lot of people that work there? I was like, yeah. And so he's like shaking his head on the phone with me, like tisking it with a thumbs up, like in front of me, like I'm, on the phone with Sprint Corporate. I'm sorry. Yeah, I'll try to get control of this kid. And he's thumbs upping me like, keep going. We got this.
Yep.
And so what happened was the Sprint account managers started saying, okay, we can't get rid of this guy. If you can't beat him, join him. So that they couldn't get Sprint Corporate to provide their own procurement portals. So they started using ours. So they started introducing me quickly through corporate accounts. And before I knew it, we had built a team and we were doing 100+ phones a month. And it was wonderful. There was a day with the Walt Disney Company that the wrong information got published. And Disney Corporate was like, look, we can't deploy our IT resources again to update this thing. Disney HR is like, hands are tied. Sprint Corporate's like, it's wrong. The employees are mad because it's wrong. And I'm in the middle. So once we got that fixed, I told Disney, I said, hey, if we built a platform for you that managed all your merchant relationships so that your IT doesn't have to do the updates and changes, we'll do it for you. And we'll keep it up to date. We can move in real time. It removes the liability from you. Your HR team doesn't have to work directly with these 300 merchants that you work with now. We'll do it. Would that help you? And they said, yeah. And the conversation was had, how do you guys want to get paid? I was like, well, we'll just charge you for the services we do. Right. And they're like, well, nobody does that. I was like, what do you mean? I was like, they make money. They require insurance policies to make money. They require advertising dollars to make money. They mark things up and dilute the discounts to make money. I was like, well, I don't like any of those. So I don't care what they do. We'll just charge you a small flat monthly fee to subscribe. And then a part of your subscription, you get the deepest discounts, you get managed services. We build it for you. So we started with the Walt Disney Company, Oracle, and the US Army. Over 1 million people out the gate had access to the platform we built. This is now 2006, where you could just hand a SaaS platform into corporate America. And we've been doing it ever since. And today we have hundreds of clients and millions of members and over 1 million redemption locations where we offer corporate perks and discounts on everything from pizza in the zoo to movie tickets, oil changes, car rentals, hotels. Our discounts are deeper than AAA and AARP, and we publish that in the perks report you can find on abenity.com. And we most recently opened that up from just the big guys who we worked with before to providing a small business plan for people with less than 150 employees can get the same corporate perks that we've been doing for these big folks for a long time. To answer your question, for the Inc. 5000, over the years as we grew and grew, the Inc. 5000 takes the 5,000 companies with the fastest growth percentage and lists them. So it's a completely financial number. It's based on top line growth. And so it's a 3-year average. So as long as your 3-year average growth level is within one of the top 5,000 in the nation, you make the list. And so we were really fortunate and blessed to be doing that for 6 years. So it's really cool.
Yeah, well, congratulations on that. And then I think it's just so interesting with your story is how you talked about understanding as entrepreneurs, what is the gap, that they need to fill. And through your wireless, you found the gap and kind of found that niche that was so unique. And that's the thing I want our entrepreneurs to think about, because some of them have been struggling. And instead, where could they niche down in their business and really make that difference, because maybe they've been trying to serve too wide of an audience. Instead, how can we drill deeper? And really it plays with our theme of this fourth quarter of think differently, because as you go into 2022, doing the same thing is not going to get you the same results. You're going to have to change something that's there. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Brian. And I'm kind of curious, because you kind of took another turn here of doing different results with really making your company a social mission.
Yep.
Can you share a little bit of that and how that came about with your process of the company?
Yeah, that's a perfect segue, because it's the next thing I wanted to mention too. And so as I'm kind of in this sprint corporate America role and things are going really well, and I've discovered, hey, there's this gap we can fill. And I went to my boss and I said, hey, we should do this, because if we did, we'd control everything. And my boss wisely said, we need to keep the main thing. And building a platform is not the main thing. You need to be selling phones. And so I said, well, I think we'll do it on the side. So we did it on the side. So there was about 1.5 years of overlap where I did it on the side until I felt like it was time to branch out. We weren't financially ready to branch out on my own, but I was recently married and I had my wife's $36,000 a year teacher salary. And so we could kind of keep the lights on and go for it. And in that pivotal period, I was pretty burned out with the day job and excited about the future of the next company, but very aware that there was a time when I really got energy from my day job. And so it wasn't necessarily me that changed. It was just the environment. Something I loved turned into something that was a burden. And so I was looking for more meaningful work at the time. And so when I was sitting with my brother, we were sitting at a Starbucks in Cool Springs, and my wife to be was there. And I said, if we start this, I want our why to be outside of our company. I want our why to be outside of our brand, outside of our products and services. I was like, our company, our brand, our products and our services, our industry, they're all going to let us down. Like there is no place for us to put our identity in any of those things. They're all going to let us down. And if they let us down, and we built everything on that, then, our house that we built is just going to crumble. And so I said, I want to create an output to ministry for every input into the business. And I want to scale it up as big as it can be. And if we make a formulaic approach to it, then we're not in control of how big it can be. Like we can really let go of it and just, from a faith-based worldview, be like, Lord, this is yours. It's all yours anyway. Do whatever you want with it. Make it as big as you want it to be. We're going to commit 15% of our net profit out the gate. That was before we made $1. So it's really easy to commit a percentage of nothing. And that became one of the greatest plans that we ever made. And we called it our social mission. And we said, well, what could we fight for? And the most challenging situation I could think of that we could fight for was extreme poverty. And my wife's like, hey, I sponsored a child through a group called World Vision at a concert I went to, and you should check them out. I think they do everything. And so I checked out World Vision. I was like, they're addressing global poverty in every way you can imagine through a really relatable model of child sponsorship, which provides a framework for a story you can share and extend. And so we chose World Vision, and we started sponsoring a child with the perks programs that we would deliver. We started sponsoring a child, and then at the end of the year, we'd give 15% of our net. And we've been doing that now for 12 years, and we just crossed over $1.2 million of direct giving. And we got our first call from World Vision in July, where they told me, I don't know how you're going to feel about this, but 100 of the kids that you're sponsoring just graduated. Their village just graduated out of extreme poverty. And so they are no longer a part of our program. The microfinance loans that you've been supporting has helped lift them out of poverty. The healthcare and education and clean water that we've set up for their village has lifted them out of extreme poverty. So they're done. So those pen pals of yours are not going to be pen pals anymore. They sent me a really amazing video from Senegal where the kids are holding a banner that said, "Help, thank you, Roland family. Thank you, Abenity." And 100 of these kids were lifted out of extreme poverty. And that just happened this year in 2021. And I can't wait to get the next call where that happens. Globally, the United Nations #1 sustainability goal is to eradicate extreme poverty everywhere by the year 2030. And one more note on this: extreme poverty is the situation where people are still walking miles and miles every day to find clean water that's not really that clean, that's making them sick still. And that trip to get water is preventing them from having education, which is preventing them from building the healthcare facilities they need. It's the root that's keeping them stuck there. Another way somebody said to share it is, it's the families who are deciding which of their children they can feed today. And so there's about 500 million people still in that spot today, but the finish line is in sight.
That is awesome. And thank you to you and your team, and really all your partners. And one thing I'd have to say with that, Brian, I have a firm belief, and I think you believe it too, because that's the reason you all did it, is really you've been blessed because you were willing to bless others. You know, you're looking outside of yourself and outside of your company, and think how often we can do that as entrepreneurs. I'm a true believer. You're doing some great works. We did a mission in Peru about 7-8 years ago, and went some of them areas that you're talking about where they walk miles every day just to get their water. And like I said, it's still not that clean, but it's the only thing that's available. Right. And really had a new appreciation. And at the time I had several children that were in high school, and one of them said, "What are we doing this for?" When he got back, he had a whole different appreciation of how abundantly we have it here in the United States, but the abundance is how can we share that with others. So
absolutely.
That is a great story. I appreciate you sharing that. Now, before we go, we've got to get into this, and we're going to go a little bit longer because there's some great information that you're sharing, but you've really set your company up as a remote work. And this is something that some businesses are struggling with. It's showing in studies for employees. As we've heard, right now, the great resignation is going on. Of course, that concerns. I've got some of those business owners, and they're concerned about how will they keep their workers, and it's about finding that flexibility. But your work is totally remote work, but also you've built a culture around it. And, you know, that's one of the things I discuss about a positive culture. So how can you share that with, you know, your story that will help them really think maybe differently? And the big thing is yours is totally remote. The big thing I want people to realize is they don't have to be totally remote, but the thing is there a mixture that you can do that really can bring some of that strength in? But I'd be curious with your teams. You said your team is completely remote. You don't have a location they show up to or anything else. So I'm curious to hear how you did that.
Yeah. 90% of us have never even met in person before. We started with a fully remote team out of necessity in 2000, right when we started in 2006. And that was because I was in Nashville. My brother was in California. It was just the two of us. Our third hire was a gal that I had worked with who had moved to the East Coast, and she was wonderful. And so it was like, why would we let geography prevent us from bringing her on when I just need her to have internet and the phone? I had gained a lot of confidence selling over the phone and over the internet. So I didn't feel like face-to-face was something that was necessary for what we were trying to do. And we just continued to build our team this way. There's a lot that goes into this because a fully remote team needs to be built on a foundation of trust and respect.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very difficult thing to maintain. One way we've really found that you maintain it is by being highly committed to a lean organization, doing your best to stay focused on hiring the resources you need, doing your best to keep people only working on the things that they can only do. Try not to have overlap where multiple people are working on the same thing, and then from there, the trust and respect is really formed as well through something that we just kind of stumbled into. But we really don't hire folks who are more than 2 or 3 degrees of separation from an existing team member. So the people that join our team come on already knowing about us, what we stand for, what we do, and they're committed to that. And then they have some accountability because they're coming alongside somebody that they know well, somebody that they're accountable to at some level. And so that has helped us keep the culture tight. And what I was most excited about with my social mission that we started, well, I started that for me to have meaningful work. I didn't expect it necessarily to create meaningful work for our team. And so it did form into our team members came on and they found it meaningful and they found it to be something that they could work for that was exciting for them. So, if we help save a Disney World ticket from getting canceled, well, then, that saved a couple $100 for the company, which, saved, a few dollars for our efforts in Senegal, and which helped the kids have clean water for another day. And so it's those little things. And so that created shared purpose within our organization, which really the shared purpose as a team aligned our culture and created this cultural alignment that really formed into a community of people working together for a common cause. In 2014, we went public with our social mission. I've written a lot about all of this on my brianroland.com website, where you can kind of dive in deeper to these stories and how it's shaped. But my biggest takeaway for the remote team is aligning your culture around something that you have in common is critical to stay connected as a team. Almost every entrepreneur that I know is very generous, and they have a giving heart, a giving spirit, and they plan to give. But that plan to give ends up in a reactionary gift at the end of the year that's not well thought out. It's not even necessarily decided on by them. It's decided on by their financial team or their CPAs or their just a whim, an emotional reaction to something. And so because of that, you're leaving a lot of impact on the table. And so I'm trying to go out there as a social entrepreneur to say to entrepreneurs, instead of planning to give, you need to have a giving plan. You need to make a plan to give. You need to say from the very beginning, we're going to do X. For every X, we're going to do X. If you're painting houses, for every 20 houses we paint, we're going to give one away. We're going to paint one house for free. And then you've created a story that you can rally everyone around, that you can share widely and let other people get behind. And that's where you get a lot of momentum for your business. What I didn't expect out of all of this is that community and that story that we shaped would create a competitive advantage for us in our industry. And that's exactly what's happened. Is as we're looking and talking to every customer and they come to our last slide in our sales presentation and we say, this is our social mission, and these are the kids that your support of us is helping us to support. Well, that helps new people become customers and choose us and trust us. And so I couldn't speak highly enough about those. So I've got 2 resources. Now's the right time, I think, to share them. Sure. So for those of you listening, I've created a 1-page impact plan that you can download and fill it out for yourself. It's the 5 steps to build your own impact plan. It's what worked for us. And you can get it by texting the word impact to this number, and you'll get an automatic response back. It's area code 615-802-6853. Text impact, just the word impact, and you'll automatically get that back. Also, I've created a one-page list of rules of engagement for a remote team. We could spend 20 minutes here talking about how to effectively communicate with a remote team to build that healthy culture, that healthy communication rhythm. Text the word rules to that same phone number. The phone number is 615-802-6853 again. So text either or both impact and rules to that, and you'll get those resources, and then you can start to think through how to do that for yourself. Now, one caution due to 2020 is remote work has been highly successful for us because we, as a team of remote distributed workers, had something that we've been fighting for 15 years. And that common cause built a bond between us that allowed us to, while we were at work, we were together. 2020 created that same kind of impact for people who are forced to send their workers home. Everyone that was sent home was fighting for a cause, and they were fighting, and the cause was fighting against an invisible enemy that we all know all too well, the name that shall not be spoken. Yeah. and my concern is, as we are exiting 2021 and into 2022, that invisible enemy is dissipating and that cause is dissipating. And so that bridge from corporate over to the island, the remote islands of remote work, is retracting. And so in 2022, if you haven't created purpose, if you haven't created a giving plan, a cultural plan for your team, everyone's going to be alone on islands, and you're going to start seeing is like, hey, why is it not working now like it did in 2020 and 2021? And it's because all those bridges are gone, and the hope and the meaningful work that they had before is gone. And so you have to be really careful the way you reestablish that. I'm not in favor of a come in the office, go at home. I think it needs to be either or. That's something we can talk about sometime if we ever want to. I'm not in favor of having remote workers out there that are the wrong personality type. I mean, there's a lot to remote work that I think we need to be aware of. That, you know, we kind of had a positive diagnosis on remote work here in the last year and a half, and I don't think it's going to last. So it's going to take a lot of intentional effort as leaders to keep our team healthy and motivated and growing. And
I think you really hit it. Is that it's got to be intentional, because just to say, oh, we want to just start doing remote work now because it worked before, and there's no plan behind it. And because you're right, you've got to be able to build that culture, you know, and, you know, in a location, sometimes it's even tough. Think about when we come together, there's companies that have toxic cultures. So just saying you're going to have the culture, you've got to figure out what is that plan to do there. And then you really hit on the real keys is you've got to have people that's in the right positions, kind of the right fit, the right personalities to be able to make that work. So just a lot of good tools. One thing we'll do is, I know a lot of our chargers, I call them for our podcast, they're exercising right now or they're driving. We'll have all that in show notes. Chris, my son, does the show notes and does a great job. So it's going to be right there on chargepodcast.com. If you didn't get that, all that information, we'll have that there, because two great resources with the impact plan and then the remote teams. And again, I'll give the number real quick. If you are able to write down 615-802-6853, but then it's either impact or rules, and you can get those tools. So I really appreciate you offering those to the Chargers and allowing them to get that, Brian. Well, just some great information. And I tell you, we went a little longer today because of what you were sharing. I think it's so important as we're looking in 2022. And you heard how I set this show up, and I've really been setting all the fourth quarter. I want Chargers to think differently, but I want them to think about what they plan to put in action on 2022. And just like you said on the social cause, you found something that you're very much passionate about yourself, and it solved a need that you had. And what you found out is your team can rally behind that. And I think that's so interesting because my passion's been since 1994 Special Olympics. And I've gotten very involved with Special Olympics Missouri, and I'm on the board, just came off as past chair. We used to just raise money and did polar plunges and put teams together. And it took a life of its own, Brian. I never expected. The first time I dressed up in this pig outfit because we were doing satellite and we were fighting the cable pig on it. And then I changed down, and I think it was myself and one other person that jumped in this freezing cold water. The last year we did it, we had over 60 team members and their families joining us to jump, and we raised $40-some thousand for that cause. Wow. And it was then I realized it was the impact. And what they really found is we found culture through it, but we found that common ground that we all wanted to be part of. And it becomes so inspiring. So I want businesses to think, how can you think differently? And I loved how you said, instead of just planning to give at the end of the year or check, what is that plan that you have to give? What is it going to be? Write it down, because that's the way you'll be blessed with it. And I've heard several other business owners that have told me early on in their career, like you all did, they made a plan and said X amount is going to our giving plan. And that's what we're going to do in our communities and for our social cause. So some great information. So now I have one more question. I'm going to have you keep this tight, but it's interesting. In your bio, you said you just hired a CEO, and most people that run their business or start their business think they have to run it. Why did you make the decision to hire a CEO so you can step back and do other things?
Well, what they never tell you as an entrepreneur is that if you're successful, your baby's going to grow up and leave you, just like my 3 girls that I'm watching grow up and take steps of independence, and ultimately they will be leaving the house. And so for the business to be healthy and successful, for my daughters to be healthy and successful, they have to leave the oversight of the founder. And so this became apparent to me when my entrepreneurial approach, which is very creatively driven, product driven, new feature driven, it just, the company couldn't handle, they couldn't keep executing on my vision. I mean, they were still working on they're still a few years behind me. It turns out it's a lot easier to come up with ideas than it is to actually build them. And so, just staring it straight in the face, it's like, for me to be healthy as a person, as an entrepreneur, my company needs something that I can't give them. They started asking me for things that I didn't want, that I wasn't interested in investing my time in. And when you're privately funded like us, when you're bootstrapping like us, and you have limited resources, our option was to raise outside capital, which would dramatically alter our culture, potentially disrupt our social mission, and cause us to operate in a new way that allowed me to stay CEO, but built this it would force me to stay CEO, because outside investors would be looking for me to stay in place, and build this deeper executive team. That just didn't feel like a good option. And so the only other option was to let go and say, hey, I know there are other leaders in our case, in our company, who can do this at a higher level than me at the highest level. And it was an awesome opportunity to step aside and let go. And I think that's also really healthy for entrepreneurs to do, so you don't end up putting your identity in your business, which is a place it shouldn't be. Or so that you don't end up putting your identity in your social mission, which is a dangerous place for it to be. You don't want to put your identity in anything. The Bible calls this idolatry. And so those things will always let you down, and it's the wrong place for that. And so ultimately that's the reason why, is it was the right time. It was the healthy move for me as an individual. It was a healthy move for my company and the phase we're in.
Well, I think that's so critical, again, because as we go into 2022, I'm not saying do it overnight, because don't do that. But for entrepreneurs that's listening to this podcast, and I know I have some of them on here, is maybe you need to get out of that CEO role. And maybe one of the plans you make is that. And it really allows you a lot more freedom. And why do most entrepreneurs get into business? Because they want that freedom of time. But what do? They do let their identity become their company. And then the challenge is they never get out of that role, and then they never have that freedom of time that's theirs. So it's so interesting to hear, sometimes you let go of that. Doesn't mean letting go of your company. You put the check balance, and you have the dashboards, and the matrices, and they have that CEO's got a reporting mechanism that comes, and now you've got those pieces in place. And what does it really relieve? Now Brian has that creativity side to take his company and find out what's the next gap and niche in his business that he needs to be filling in that business, versus it becomes stagnant. Because sometimes as CEOs, let's be honest, we get caught in the day-to-day, and then we're not changing our company, but the marketplace is changing, but we're staying the same because we have to be there. Well, some great information. I'll tell you, this is one that I'm going to tell Chargers now. You're going to have to share with some of your entrepreneur friends, because they need to hear this, because part of what you're saying is we've got to think differently. It's changing our mindset. And I really appreciate you sharing that. I've got 3 quick questions we're going to ask before we let you go, Brian, because I want to hear your answers on the recharge round. But the first one is charge. As you know, that's the name of the podcast, Create Habits Around Real Goals Every Day. What's a habit that you think has helped make you successful in life?
Yeah. This is, I'm thinking about the other questions that are coming. So I'm going to go a little trivial, but a habit. I started making my coffee in a slow pour over method 5 years ago, which was one of the greatest focus things that I can do, because it kept me from sitting at the computer all day long and just grabbing another cup from the pot. And so it got my coffee consumption way down. And at the same time, it created an intentional rhythm that jump-started my day and put me into these incremental mode. So I think breaking up the routine and doing something a little harder intentionally to build some space has been a positive routine for me. My wife would not always agree, because it does take extra time from the morning routine.
Excellent. How about a simple positive action that you do that really helps you move forward each day?
Yeah. Something I realized when I had little girls and a wife that was now in charge of little girls, that that sarcasm no longer landed in a place that was funny. And that was a really strange realization, because I'm always quick-witted and a lot of times sarcastically. So as I was working diligently to scrub sarcasm from my routine so that I could have a happy life, I realized that everything I thought of sarcastically, when you flip it around the other way from the negative to the positive, is still funny. Mm-hmm. And so when I have a sarcastic thought, I flip it around and say it in the opposite way as quickly as possible. And then it lands in a positive way that is affirming and building up instead of tearing down. And people still think it's funny.
Yep. And putting those positive thoughts in really creates a deposit with your girls or with your wife or whoever it is. It makes that real deposit. And we know if we make more deposits than withdrawals, you've got a happier life too. So that's excellent. Good.
That's good.
How about the last one is really, you've had a lot of life lessons, I'm sure, as you went on this journey, and it's not over yet, but up to now, what would you say your biggest life lesson, and what did you learn from it?
So I always say, just show up. When I get the, what would you tell your 18-year-old self question, which is a form of this question, just show up. I've always said I'm a project manager. Again, I'm coming from a faith-based worldview. So I'm like, everything around me is is under God's sovereignty and by design. And so just looking at what's been put in front of you and be a responsible project manager and make good stewardship decisions and just show up. Making it a little more practical. I've always tried to focus on high impact, low input activities. So this is not advice for a doctor. This is not advice for an engineer. But if you're in sales or marketing, or you're looking to start a business, develop a product, a lot of times developing to the 90% point is all it takes to start to get traction and get things moving. And you can waste 2 or 3 times the amount of time it takes to get to 90% trying to get from 90 to 99% or 100%. And so I've learned just to abandon the 91 to 100% realm, focus on 90%, and then make incremental improvements from there to just get started.
That is great advice. Get started and show up. And we're so glad Brian showed up today for us, Chargers, because we've got a packed full of lessons there. But the biggest thing is, I think, Brian, our conversation really helps them think deeper. And that's really what I wanted to do in this fourth quarter, because we can't tell them what it's for them. But if they show up and they really think through this conversation, what's showing up in their life? And really, it's not us discovering it. It's allowing God to help us discover it. And I tell people all the time, I openly talk about faith here. If you're on the other side of the coin and you don't have a belief, that's your choice. But the thing is, people that do have a belief, there is something greater that allows us that capability. And I hope you really take a look at that, because I think, what is he asking for us? What are we really searching for? And I think the one thing that's happened over this last 2 years is people are thinking differently, and they know they want to show up differently. And Brian, you really give us that opportunity. Share with them again your website. We'll have also those links for the one pages in there. Share that so they can connect with you, Brian.
Thank you. So we'd love to help your businesses with corporate perks, and we've got $150 off your kind of first month free service if you're a small business with the code CHARGE150. So use the code CHARGE150 at abenity.com to do that. If you have an offer or product or service you want to bring to our 3 million plus members, then you can hit us up there as well, and we can help introduce you. And that way, I've been writing about social entrepreneurship and my journey exiting as CEO without exiting the business at brianroland.com. And you'll find those resources, the impact plan and my rules of engagement, on brianroland.com as well.
Excellent. And we'll have all that in show notes. So if you are driving or doing that exercise right now, I do a lot of that when I'm listening to the podcast. We will have that on chargepodcast.com. Just go there. All the links will be easily to click, and you can check that out. So really check out Brian and his information, some great things that you're doing. And I just really appreciate you sharing your time with us today, Brian. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary.
Chargers, now your goal is lots of information, but what are you going to do? And I always tell you when we get done, what's the one action from this? Take that one action, write it down, and take progress on that. You may have 3 or 4 things you want to do, but start on the first one and show up on really applying that first action. And then the other thing I want you to do is, another entrepreneur that needs to hear this message. And what I ask you to do is go to your podcast app. It's real simple. Before we get done, the 3 dots are there. It'll say share. You probably have their mobile number in your phone. Send this to them and just put a little message. I thought you needed to listen to this because I think it can really make a difference in your business. Number 1, they'll be appreciative that you do. But number 2, they take action from what the information they hear. It could change their business and their life, and think they could impact a lot of people with their social program that they put in place. So Chargers, I appreciate you being here. We're going to have another great guest next week, but I appreciate Brian showing up and being with us today. But come back next week and we'll have another great guest, and make it a great day. See you soon.
This podcast is ended, but your life doesn't just stop. To continue your inspiring journey, head over to chargepodcast.com and access all the tools and resources mentioned on today's show. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing with somebody who may also benefit from the advice provided. That's chargepodcast.com. Until next time, charge in business and life.